Right, welcome to the Foundational Light Coaches Coffee Club. This is going to be a new segment on the YouTube channel, basically aimed at connecting with coaches in the North East to talk about all things coaching, football development. We're delighted to have three of the Foundational Light legends in the room today to obviously kick us off on the first edition. So, Jamie, would you mind just introducing yourself quickly and just a little bit around your journey as a coach so far?
Yeah, so I'm Jamie Wright. I'm the Managing Director here at the Foundation. I've been at the club for 22 years now. Wayne and Ian gives me first job here. And I've been lucky enough to work with some great coaches over the years, both at the Foundation and the Boys Academy and the Girls Academy more recently.
We've got Ian Dipper here as well. Ian, if you want to share a little bit about your journey.
I've been here for 26 years now. Worked right across all areas really. Worked with the girls football at the beginning. We used to be the centre of excellence. Then moved into the Boys Academy, and then back with the Foundation Wright for the last 10 years.
And we've also got Wayne Walls.
Hi, I'm the Assistant Academy Manager for the girls football programme within the Foundation and the football club. Worked for Sunderland either through the Foundation or community as it used to be, and the Academy for the last 35 years.
Great stuff. So I think with the experience and sort of expertise that we've got in the room, I wanted to sort of spend a little bit of time just talking about coaching in the foundation phase. Obviously the three staff that we've got here have coached for a long time in that age range, and I would like to call them experts if you like. So just going to fire some questions at you really, and I want it to be more of a conversation more than anything, so feel free to chip in at any time. Wayne, I'm going to start with you. If you could just sort of tell us a little bit about what your beliefs and your values are when coaching within the foundation phase.
I think the game's changed a lot over the years, so I think when I first started, certainly with the Boys Academy, that there wasn't structured leagues or teams lower than under 10. Obviously that's changed now that you've got teams from pretty much under 6. I think that brings positives and maybe issues as well around sort of how the players learn and develop, and a little bit around creativity and experimenting. But I think the big thing with the foundation phase is you've got to have coaches involved that are experts in working in those areas. It is a lot different in a lot of ways. But the biggest thing is that it's got to be fun for the players. It's got to be engaging. It's got to be challenging. And they've got to learn, sort of across the board as the play and the develop. But I think the big thing for me is that it's got to be fun, but they've got to experience all parts of the game, not necessarily be sort of pigeonholed with different positions. And that's, I think, where the adults are involved in leading the sessions, or the coaches involved in leading the sessions have got to have a sort of real understanding of what's needed in those age groups in relation to how the kids learn, how the kids develop, but making sure that everything's, that the experience is fun, whether it's a little bit easier for them or a little bit more challenging.
Stuff. Jamie, Ian, I don't know if you want to sort of add anything around what your beliefs and values are. Like, if you were looking for a good example of a foundation phase coach, like what would that look like? What attributes, skills, qualities would they have?
I think from my point of view, it's wants and needs. It's what we want as coaches, but it's what the kids need as well and what they want. I think sometimes some of the coaching is based around, it's rushed in terms of trying to get them too quick to a certain point. I think that we've got to understand child development. That's the big thing for me, and it takes time in doing that. So, and the other one for me is connection. I think we've got to connect, and it's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to put across and connect with them kids who's in front of you. And the last bit for me is fun. It has to be fun. I see a lot of coaches when they're talking about at Christmas time they'll put a fun session on. I think every session should be fun. You should still try and get out what you want out of it, and that's a bit like stealth coaching really, but they're having fun and picking things up from you without knowing really. So, and it's not an easy process. It's not an easy process at all, and it takes time to be able to do that.
I think from my point of view, just following on from what Ian just said there, it's hard, I think, to be a good coach. You know, I think the amount of things you've got to think about before you even get to the session. You know, if you're a volunteer coach, you know, who's taking a grassroots team, you've had a hard day at work, you've got your own family, your own pressures, you know, then you're turning up for a session, you know, you might not have had time to prepare and then deliver it. But even if you're a professional coach, you know, catering for what in the foundation phase, 10 to 12 different players, you know, all their needs, what's their day at school being like, what's their family life like at that minute. You know, you're not just a coach, sometimes you're the one positive role model in their lives. You know, I think there's a lot to consider, and I probably don't think a lot of coaches appreciate how much of an impact they have on people's lives, I think. But I think with that comes a lot of responsibility as well, because you've then got to make sure that it's a real positive, like that week is, you know, that session, is the, might be the one bright spot in their life or that week. And you know, I think, you know, it's tough, but the best coaches are the ones that they want to learn, like they want to ask questions, they want to get better. And it's not just about winning a game on a weekend, it's much more than that. It's how do we get there. And just to echo what the two have just said, like, it's not a race either, you know, knowing that it's going to take time, and it, you know, you might not actually see the benefits of the work that you put in, because someone else, another coach further down the line might get the benefits from the work that you do with them.
Yeah.
I think I've been lucky that I've worked with Ian and Jamie for a lot of years, and I think one of the things that always set them apart for me was that if they had a group of kids within 10-15 minutes of being around them, that would be able to tell you, you know, whether they played musical instruments, what their favourite music was, whether they do other sports or did other activities. They got to know the person first and help to develop the person before we even got to the stage of looking at the footballer. So I think that sort of approach is really, really important. You've got to deal with the person first. If we get the person right, and obviously they feel comfortable in the environment and they understand what we're trying to achieve, then it makes developing the player a lot easier. And certainly from my perspective, these two are the best I've seen at doing that.
But I think where I was definitely lucky coming through was I had good people like you two in particular to challenge us, you know, to take over my session every now and again. But like, you know, all that stuff was my learning. Whereas, I don't know, I'll chuck that question to you, Jack, like, you're a lot younger than us three. Like, what's that like for you as a coach now? Are you getting that same level of support and mentoring that we've all probably benefited from?
Yeah, I would think so. Like, obviously, I think we're really fortunate to work in such a good environment where we've got a lot of experienced staff at the foundation. I suppose the challenge in coaching in the foundation phase is, like, not every grassroots club or other environments have that level of support, so it's good for obviously things like this, such as the podcast, to try and just give those little hints and tips out and bits of advice so that we can try and help the wider coaching community, really. But I just think if you can find that mentor or someone to bounce ideas off or to stretch and challenge you as a coach, as long as you're open to that, then you're only going to get better, and the better you are, the better the kids will be that you work with. Good stuff. So just moving on a little bit, just to get into the topic of coaching a little bit more. Jamie, I'll come to you first for this one, just around if you were planning a session in the foundation phase, like, what's the sort of process you would go through before a training session? What does it look like? What are the sort of key aspects of development that you're looking to try and bring out with the children in those sessions? Like, what are the priorities in the foundation phase, if you like?
I mean, I think we've already touched on it. Like, it's got to be a fun session, I think, first and foremost. And I think everyone's got to be involved, you know, so I'm not a big fan of, you know, static practices or a lot of practices where there's a lot of waiting around. I think, you know, I tend to start with a game, you know, so that they can maybe burn a bit of energy off first, so they can have a game. Now, that could be a conditioned game, or it could just be a match. I think the longer I've coached, I think the more I'm a big fan of that, like, individual technical excellence. So, like, you know, setting challenges around, you know, being good with both feet, left and right foot. And that was always something that Wayne and Dips were massive on when I worked from at the academy. You know, it was like every player, like, it was almost our job when they left the foundation phase that they were technically proficient with both feet. You know, so I've always had that in me coaching sort of mindset around whatever they're doing, whether it's dribbling, passing and receiving, it's always got to be with both feet. There's got to be a lot of games because I do like, and again I think because I've been lucky enough to go through A license recently, you know, I think what does it look like in the game? So like if I'm even in 7v7, 5v5, if I find myself in the central midfield area of the pitch, what does that look like for me? What's me scanning like? Have I prepared any space to receive the ball? Because I think you can do that with under 7s, 8s, 9s. You've just got to make sure that the level of detail that you're given is appropriate to the age group. But yeah, I think, you know, it's linking everything together. But ultimately, it's like, what does it look like in the game, so that, you know, when it comes to their Saturday or their Sunday when they're playing, they see the link and go, oh, that's why we worked on that, and that's why, you know, we're playing in the game today.
So I want to jump on your point around like some of the key detail you talked about there around like scanning. I think just one thing, and I don't know if you agree or disagree, but when we're working with those younger players, it's like what the type of language that we use to bring those sort of that detail to life. So, you know, if I'm talking about shielding the ball or protecting the ball, like what sort of phrases and words might you use to help the younger players understand it? So I don't know if you've got any examples of different things you might use when you're coaching, just to make it real for the young people that are in the sessions.
I think the wording's very important, isn't it? It's got to be child-like. Just on the scanning bit there, I've been using something just like an owl. An owl looks right round, and you know, you're probably not going to do that with a 16 to 19-year-old, but the younger players probably will get a connection with that. So it's using the right terminology and the right wording, so it connects with them kids. So it has some type of like a glue or stick to them. So when you come in on a match day, and you can use them trigger words as such. So it connects to the train, like what Jamie was saying, connects from training into the games. And again, there might be funny words, because them are the type of words will probably stick. Something what connects and makes it fun.
I seem to remember a coach a few years ago using batfink as an example. My wings are like a shield of steel.
Mm.
I'm not sure how many of the kids would remember that nowadays, but I agree. I think the language is really important. I think sometimes, coaches, as coaches, we can get carried away with it's our language, whereas I think sometimes we've got to really think about the kids' language and what they would understand and relate to. It's not always about us, and you know, we can go on the qualifications and for things to sink in with us. We'll use terminology that everybody will understand, but that's maybe not always appropriate for the younger age groups. So I think that is something that coaches have really got to think about. Plus there'll be things that individuals will relate to more than others, whether that's because of another sport they do or a different type of activity. So I definitely think that's something that you've got to, as coaches, you've got to really think about, and they say it's not just as a group, it's as individuals as well, making sure that they understand what you.
I think we've got a responsibility as coaches to look at the detail that underpins all that though. So like scanning as the example, I hear a lot of coaches, and I did it myself at first, like just say scanning. So then you start seeing kids like chucking their head over the shoulder, but then what are they actually noticing, you know, and why are they scanning, and is it helping them make their next decision, or is it because it looks good to their coach? So then, you know, why do you scan, and where do you scan, and how often? And you know, everyone uses the Frank Lampard clip, don't they, where he scans so many times before he receives the ball, but then it's bringing that to life, because then what did that enable him to do? So I think it's great that we're, you know, the age appropriate stuff's absolutely spot on, but then I think as a group of coaches we've got like a responsibility to break that down so that the kids understand why we're asking them to do that. I think that's like really important for me.
I came out last night, we did a session last night on that, and what are you looking for? And you're asking the players, and I haven't got that answer. So what are you actually looking for? You're looking for maybe space when you're scanning, you're looking for your players, and you're looking for opponents. And I don't think sometimes that's maybe is given across. It's just ask them to look, check your shoulder, well what are you checking for? Can we give them that little piece of information, what really is going to make a difference? Some people are probably left last night, and they might be just checking to see if there's any space, but in a couple of weeks' time it might be space and players. Might be, and then in a 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks time, it could be all 3. But you might still have that one person just checking for space again. So you've got to really, it's a drip feed for me, but it's giving that information what they really need.
And that's key, and it's long term. If you're talking about the foundation phase, they're not going to be ready-made players at the end of it, are they? They're going on to the next phase. So then, sometimes I think we're in a rush. They don't scan well enough. Well, probably not, no, because they're 10. It's going to take time, and they're going to make mistakes, and as they get better in other areas of the game, they may forget that. But I think it's how do we revisit the basics, and how do we sort of plan. And I think that's where the language is so important, because you used to hit the 9 and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like, that was something that I heard for the first time last season, but then everyone uses it now because it's so memorable. But then the players get it, hit the 9 and you'll be fine. You can hear them saying it, the players, the coaches, and I think it's like, they get a lot of information chucked at them. So if it can be something that you remember, and it's like, I remember that now, it just reinforces messages, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think there's some really good takeaways for coaches there, just around making sure the sessions are fun, making sure that the language that we use is child suitable, like it's age appropriate, and obviously a lot of game based stuff. So I know, Jamie, you touched on there just around you like to start your sessions off with a game to burn some energy. I suppose, like, Dips, I'll just fire that to you then. Like, if you had an hour a week with an under 10s team, like, what would the structure of your hour look like with that team?
I'd try to base mine on a lot of decision making. So even the technical bit at the beginning, I'll always stick a defender in somewhere or some type of interference, because I feel that's what happens in the game. Very rarely do you receive the ball and you haven't got anything maybe coming into your own personal space. And there's an argument for that. There's an argument, well, they've got to learn how to have that technical base skill first before that maybe sometimes. And it's just my personal preference. I might put one defender in and there might be 12 players out there, and there'll be opportunities for them to receive that ball not under pressure, but there might be 1 or 2 times that they'll get that. I might stick another 3 defenders in later down the line. So mine's all about decision making. My personal belief is that it's about making the right decision at the right time and using the right skills and whatever for that. So I'm probably right in that corner across there that I do a lot of my stuff in game-based stuff. And there's nothing wrong with isolated practice. I know that myself. And it's just what you feel as a coach. Many moons ago I used to think different about that. I used to think, well, that doesn't look like the game, so I'm going to ignore it. But I think they do need that. Some players do need that isolated stuff. But ultimately, it's when you're under pressure. It's when there's something else interfering in your space, and you've got to be able to deal with that. So my sessions are usually I usually have 4 different sessions really. I'll have the warm-up, I'll have maybe 2 small-sided condition games, and I'll finish up with a game at the end, hoping that them things are going to come out in the game at the end, and that's what I'll coach. What I've coached in here, I'll try and bring out in the game at the end, to remember and get that connection. That's the key for me. But everybody's different, and everybody's different in what they do.
I suppose it's got to fit your environment, isn't it? So I know, like, a lot of us in the room are really fortunate where we might get to see those players for 3-4 hours a week, so we can probably split our time up a little bit more intelligently around, like, we've got some more time for isolated practice, but like, if you've got that 1 hour a week on a quarter of a 3G pitch on a cold Tuesday night, it's like, right, what's your players going to get the most out of, like, how are they going to benefit from that hour? So is it a case of in the foundation phase, like, it needs to be small-sided, games based, active, so that the ball's rolling, the kids are active, they're moving all the time? Like, would you say that's a key takeaway for coaching in the foundation phase?
We're talking about these grassroots coaches, and I think we forget that this is our full-time job. This is what we do day in, day out, and usually 6-7 days a week. If I went into their environment, into their working environment, and there might be electricians or I don't know, finance or whatever, they'll be brilliant at what they do, and I'll be coming in their areas and I'll be probably doing stuff that I think's okay, but I haven't got them little golden nuggets what they have. And I think we've got to really think about that when we're asking grassroots coaches and really realising that maybe it's a part-time thing for them. And what they do, what I've seen out there has been some really good stuff for people who are just given their spare time. There's been some really good stuff. On the other hand, there is other stuff as well, but not great. But they just need help from other people, I think, at the end of the day. Yeah, so...
Hopefully this podcast will open the door for that
hopefully,
as well.
Hopefully.
Wayne, I'm just going to chuck a final sort of coaching question at you. We've talked a lot about training sessions, structure. What does a good foundation phase match day look like in terms of for the players and the coaches?
I think obviously maximum playing time. I think every player at the younger age groups, and this is my personal preference, but I think they should all get equal playing time. Whether it's grassroots, whatever the environment, the parents all give up the same amount of time, though it all costs them, money to be able to go and play and allow the children to have that opportunity. And I think for me, it's all at those younger age groups. It's all about playing and development. So players should get equal opportunity to go and do that on a match day. As for the actual setup on the day, I think obviously it should always be organised. So the coach should be prepared. But then when they're actually playing the game, it shouldn't. I mean, we learnt probably a lot from the Dutch when the Dutch came across, in that I think people try and probably fire too much information at players on a match day, whereas really the match day should be their time to show that what they've done in training they can then transfer into the gameplay on a weekend. So for me, it should be probably as much just about getting the kids to relax, a little bit of motivation, but just maybe reminding them on what they've worked on for that last week, and then they should be the things that maybe targeted in the games, so the kids don't feel under too much pressure. They maybe ask little questions about what they're doing, or the decisions maybe sometimes that they've made, what they saw, how they felt at the time. But the big thing is they get the opportunity to play it, they get the opportunity to enjoy it, and it should always be a balance of, sometimes if they're playing in a division where it's maybe a little bit tougher on a Saturday, maybe organising friendlies where it's a little bit easier, so they get a chance to experiment, they get a chance to try new things, experience a little bit more success when they're maybe not as stressed. But ultimately it's getting that balance week in, week out for all the players. But I certainly think for me the game time's massive, that they should all play, and it should still be a fun exercise. The players, I always talk about, you should hear the players first before you see them. But when you're playing, on a Saturday, if we closed our eyes, we should hear the kids and not the adults, which I don't think that always comes out when you go and watch games. It should be their time to shine, pinching somebody's little phrase.
I think we could do a full podcast on match day coaching, and it's probably something we'll revisit. But Dips, Jamie, anything to add from you around just like that match day for the younger players, like positives, negatives, what does it need to look like?
I think we're all guilty at times of going into match mode, so it's a game, it's like, I don't know, it's got a different feel to it on it, on a match day. But I think for me it should be an extension of training, particularly at the foundation phase. So like, if we're asking them to be brave and be bold and have a go at things in training, then why should match day be any different? But then if it doesn't come off in a match day, let's not criticise them. And I think, that's probably where we all fall down sometimes, where because we don't get that instant success in a game, we might ask them to do something a bit different rather than coach them in the game. So, I think being a good coach on match day, and like you say, I think it's a different podcast altogether, but like I think coaching on a match day is really important. And, how often do you see it when a team's starting to maybe get beat a little bit, the coach goes really quiet? But actually, is that not the time where the kids need a little bit of help? And it's not telling them what to do, it's asking the right questions, so you're challenging them in a different way. So I think match days are, they're part of your training program, but it should have a nice look and feel about it. And the last thing you want is your kids turn up dreading it or worried about it because they're playing against the top team. It should be they should want to embrace the challenge and build a bit of resilience and you know, and teaching young people how to win, how to lose, and you know, all of that. And I think that's where the skill of the coach is really important. But I think that'd be a brilliant future podcast, definitely, to delve into that a little bit deeper.
I know when I used to be a little bit involved on the recruitment side, I think some of the parents used to think I was nuts because you'd have conversations with them on the sidelines, they wouldn't have a clue who you were. But I would like challenge people on, you watching an under 7 and under 8 game, and like it's as if you've got like a home and away end, and I'm like asking people questions to say, well, it's a 7-year-old kid that scored a goal, should everybody not be applauding, you know, from a spectator's point of view? It's about developing them all, and you know, especially at the younger age groups, they need that encouragement and support. But it should be across the board. It doesn't matter who your team's playing, who you're playing for. We should be encouraging them all. And then if they have that environment, then they will experiment a bit more. They will feel comfortable trying things. And the other side of that is they'll probably not feel as bad if they make a mistake, or if they give a goal away, or if the team doesn't win the game. They should all want to be winners, but at the younger age groups, it's definitely not the most important part of the process.
So my last question, just around the match day, because I said it's another podcast in itself, and one I think I'll quite look forward to being involved in, is, but if you're working with a 7-a-side team and you've got 10 players, like, how are you engaging the substitutes or the game changers or whatever you want to call them? Like, how are you engaging them for those minutes that they're off? Like, any advice for people out there?
It's a tough one as well, because you can get enthralled in the game from a coach's point of view, and you forget what's happening around you. For me, it's just about them getting to observe and see things, what's happened in training. I think that's the key thing for me. It's linking what you do in training into your games, and that's people who's observing from the sideline. We even share that now with the parents. We ask the parents to think, what have you seen in training? This is the key messages we're giving out. But I think from that point of view, it's just a matter of them engaging with them. You know, you don't have to be in the game all the time. The game's on the outside as well, and it's stepping back and having a look at that, and engaging the subs as well, in terms of, did you see what happened there? What do you think we've done well there so far? So yeah, it's difficult because you can get easily sucked into the game.
I've seen some great stuff over the years. Like I remember with these two, and don't get me wrong, we were lucky enough to have the space to be able to do this. But you know, 3 kids who weren't playing for us and the 3 kids who weren't playing for them, mini pitch set up, go and play 3v3, or 2v3 or whatever that might look like. Mix the teams up so they're still playing. It's just not the match. I've seen, Kev Dark, who works with us, has done some good stuff in the past around on the iPad, and it's maybe spotting. He uses the app Dartfish, so maybe they've, you might have been working on a first time finishes, so it might be, well, how many times you see a first time finish tick, and then you can do, some low level match analysis at the end. I've definitely been part of it as well, where we've encouraged the players who aren't on the pitch to do the team talk at half time. So I think there's ways that you can do it, but I think the key thing with it is consistency, not just doing it as a one-off. It then becomes part of your culture and the way that you work, and it's not just a case of, right, you're off, you sit there over there quietly. It's part, back to my point earlier about being an extension of training, and it's, well, how you engage in the full group, not just the 7 players as the example you used on the pitch,
I think it's maximising every opportunity. So whether that's learning by watching and observing, maybe he's doing a little exercise, or if you've got players that maybe need a little bit of extra work in certain areas, setting exercises up, so while they're off they can be practicing that, so they're still getting that learning and development opportunity, even if they're not actually on physically playing in the match at the time. So again, it's from coaches, it's about working smart.
Yeah. And I think from a coach's perspective, it's not being scared to be a bit different, because I think everything that we've just said there would probably be a bit different to what else you see out there normally. And that thing of being busy for me would be a good thing. I think ultimately, if you're taking your role as a coach seriously, whether you're paid or unpaid, volunteer or whatever, that's be brave enough to step outside the comfort zone a little bit. And it might look a bit, well, why are they not engaged? Well, no, because they're learning, they're just doing something a bit different. And it's no different to being in the classroom and you've got the main group of the class doing the exercise that the teachers set, but then, you know, maybe there's another set of kids have been given a different challenge for whatever reason, and they're working on something a bit different at that time.
I think the assistants, I see a lot of assistant coaches now, and they're probably not as utilised as they should be. I know they get usually sometimes sent across to the other side of the pitch, and you have this stereophonic thing going on down the line. That assistant could be then working with the subs in terms of, did you see this, or this is what you might be thinking, what's the opposition doing really well, how can we maybe change that when we go on. So it's just, like you say, it is working a bit smarter, and it's just trying to come away from the game a little bit and working as a team. And I think you're going to probably mention that in another match day when we'll have a chat about that later on. But what is the assistant doing? That's quite a topic in itself, I think.
Good stuff. We're going to move on just to a segment that we're going to do in every podcast with whichever guest we have on. So it's just called the Fall 5. It's 5 quick fire questions. I'll start from right to left, and I just want your answer and a little bit of an explanation as to why. So Jamie, we'll start with you. The best bit of advice you've received as a coach?
Good question. Best bit of advice. You never know it all. You know, I think sometimes, you know, I was really lucky that I got into the foundation and the academy really quickly, and there was probably a phase where I thought it was it. You know, I was 18, 19-year-old and working in a really good environment with really good staff. But I think, you know, I didn't know it all. I still don't. But I think you know, just making sure I keep learning and, you know, keep being open-minded and, yeah, making sure that I never think I'm the finished article, I think would probably be the best bit of advice I've got.
Probably it's not about you, it's about them. That's always sticks with us. Because you can end up having an ego, and you've got to draw that back. You're there to help them develop and become the best people they can be. So, yeah, it's not about you, it's about them.
I love the fact you said people there, not players, because it's not all about the football. Like, there's a very small percentage.
I think the football comes back, Jack. I think the football comes. If you develop them as people, I think the football comes. I think they buy into it, and then they'll get. Wayne used to say it years ago. They get this "I want to" feeling about. I want to get better at this. I want to do this, but you've got to get that buy-in first. So, yeah, definitely about people.
I was going to say people first, but you've just killed us.
Oh, sorry.
The other bit probably, and this wasn't from a football person, it was actually from my daughter's horse riding instructor, learn their language, which I think ties in a little bit the same thing. I think what we get tied up so much about coaching terminology, you know, adult words. I think we've got to remember who we're working with, and I think it's so important that we make sure that the messages and whatever we're doing is age specific and in a way that the kids can relate to. So for me, I would probably say definitely people first, and I think learn their languages is a really good one.
I'm going to challenge all three of you now. So that's the best bit of advice you've received. If I was a new grassroots coach taking a team for the first time, other than what you've said already, what advice would you give me?
Probably the biggest two things would be find coaches to go and watch and talk as much football as possible. I think that's something that the amount of clubs, the amount of times you see where there's lots of coaches working together, and I'm not sure if we spend enough time bouncing off each other, giving each other ideas, questioning, just challenging. I think we were fortunate in that you probably end up getting divorced if you go down this route, but we used to be in a car park for an hour, 90 minutes, sometimes 2 hours after training, just bouncing off each other about players, about sessions, things that we maybe thought went well, things that we could maybe do differently. So for me, it's that thing of, I know one of you has already mentioned that you never know everything. You know, there's always something that you can pick up and improve and develop. And I just think for me, watching people, being around people, and talking about it is really, really important.
I would say the same. You need to go out there and look and educate yourself and put the yards in, put the time into it, what you want to what you want to be. Local county FAs have some really good local stuff now. They have master classes and stuff like that. But yeah, don't get caught up as well in session plans. I see a lot of people out there having 100 different sessions. Yes, look around, but choose the ones what you think is going to be right for you. People call it magpie coaching, I think now. So just pick out of other people, and then you'll end up being yourself.
I mean, I would probably have said the same as these two, but I suppose something a bit different. It would be to be reflective. I think, but not too critical. But I think always think about, reflect on the sessions, reflect on what you've done, what you've said, how you've said it, and can you be better next time? And I think because, like I said earlier, I think we've got such a responsibility working with young players that, we need to make sure we get it right, and we will get it wrong. But I think as long as we're reflective, then I think we can hopefully get better and better as we develop.
Great stuff. And I'm going to stick with you, Jamie, just because I think two of them are sat in the room. But talk to me about the importance of a mentor.
I didn't probably see it as mentoring when I first was receiving it. Sometimes you get frustrated because people step in your sessions, but I wouldn't be anywhere near whether I'm good, bad or indifferent, but the level of coach I am now, I would never be the level out if it wasn't for these two, because I was lucky enough to be, as Wayne said earlier, in the car parks for 2 hours, phones going off every 2 minutes in, where are you? But that was the best learning, just talking about football, coaching, when people stepping into me sessions, it was like with a purpose though, it was to improve it or to show me what I was missing. Because again, because I said earlier, I got into an academy at quite a young age, but I didn't understand the game. So I was probably coaching from my session plan, but actually what does the game actually need and want and tell us at that minute in time, and what does it look like for that player in whatever position they're playing. So, I think having a mentor is so important. And again, back to that reflective piece, if you're open-minded enough to take that feedback on board, but also that should never stop. No matter how old you are, no matter how many years you've been coaching, I think you should always have that person that you go to or people, and you can ask questions or you can be challenged, but you've got to be open-minded to it, or else it's not mentoring. It's just you being defensive, and you've got to be open-minded to it. Not too sure how quick fire these questions are like, but yeah.
Anything to add, fellas?
I think it doesn't always just have to be a football person either. I think, again, we're fortunate that we can have access to maybe teachers that can come and watch sessions. You've probably got parents that, I can remember when I very first started coaching, I got advice from, one was a teacher whose child was in the session, one was a coach who coached adults, and they give me a little bit of advice the first few sessions, which just helped us massively, because I didn't have the greatest control of the group, and I'm talking about 6 and 7. I was probably coming out of the session more shattered than the kids were. So it's not just necessarily football people. It doesn't always have to just be one person. If you can find as many as you can that you can bounce off and listen to, and it'll give you feedback. But anything that you can take away and reflect on, I think is always going to help you improve and ultimately make the sessions better for the players, which should be the ultimate goal.
Couple of more light-hearted ones to finish with. The best player you've coached and why?
Well, if you're talking about the players that have maybe achieved the most, then I'm fortunate that I can chuck probably Henderson and Pickford into there. But if you're talking about younger players, probably in the girls' game, probably Grace Eade, who's in the women's first team in the minute. Emily Cassip, who's a young player going through that just for ability, but work ethic and attitude. In the boys' game, again, younger players, Elliot Embleton, Dan Neil, Barley, Mumba, Sam Greenwood were were really good players but had great attitude. I'm going to stick my neck out here, but probably the one where nearly every session from being 6-year-old you come away going, wow, is Chris Rigg, who's obviously just involved in the first team at the minute.
I'd have to say Steph Horton.
Why?
I don't know, just the way she conducts herself, the way she plays, just the full package. Every time I see her, I'm just really proud of her, and just to be part of that journey. And it was a very young age I worked with her, but just a nice person, nice family, just sticks out for me. I don't know why. And you know, I've probably worked with a lot what Wayne's worked with and what with Jimmy's, but she always sticks out for me as just being the right person for me.
It's a horrible question, isn't it? I mean, obviously, a lot of the names that they've mentioned, I've been lucky enough to work with. One player that I think challenged us as a coach, I think, but was a really, really good player was Andrew Nelson. You know, and I think sometimes we love working with players that, you know, are just brilliant on the grass, but obviously there's other things that go on as well. And I think we all probably had a great experience with Andrew. You know, I think it challenged us, but it was like, you know, it was working with a type of player that we've not worked with before, but he could do everything that you know, if you're describing an exciting player, he did everything, didn't he, at the foundation phase, if we're talking about that. Like, he was quick, he was strong, he scored goals, he ran his heart out, he wouldn't be scared to kick people, like, he did everything, like, you know, he excited you, and, you know, driving into work thinking, man, I'm working with Nella tonight, that was great. You know, Katie Watson's probably in the female, but, you know, that squad that we had, you know, Katie, Grace, Ella, Poppy, Leanna, you know, there's been some great players on boys and female side, so I'm deliberately not answering your question, not naming one, but yeah, I think we've been really lucky to work with some top players, and more importantly, good people as well. I think that's like, yeah.
Final question, just again, probably just for a bit of advice for coaches out there, really, like, what's the best coaching purchase you've ever made?
Easy. Horsevine, developing youth soccer. We were fortunate we came across him. He was German, but he worked with Nike, but he'd worked in Italy, Spain, South America. Background was hockey and education, but he was probably, from a coaching perspective, one of the biggest influences in philosophy, the game, being the teacher, doing a lot of activities in competition, and that was the first book I think I got of his, and that's a lot of that stuff stayed with us, and I still probably use, you know, now 10-15 years later.
I would say the same, to be fair. I actually gave a book a few weeks ago to one of our trainee coaches, and that was the first book. I said, if you want to have a first pit stop in coaching, that's it. That was fine. Changed the way I coach. I was probably a lot of a performance coach at the time, and he made us think differently about it, so yeah, I would say Horst.
I'm going to go like really basic here, but recently a whistle. I know that's daft, but like I just think for, you know, controlling, you know, behaviour management within your group, to, you know, to get the kids or the players' attention when you need to get it, to, you know, to sometimes get tempo going in your sessions. I just think, like, and I'm not blessed with like these two. These can just do it off the spot. I cannot whistle. Yeah. You know, Crofty was a great whistler as well. Right. I was very jealous of that, but yeah, a whistle just to help me be able to then perform my role as a coach.
Great stuff. Lads, appreciate your time. It's not easy to get 3 members of staff from the foundation in the room at the same time to talk about coaching. We're all busy, but hopefully people enjoy listening, and we'll be back probably in the next month with a new episode and some new guests. So thank you very much.